Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It's 11:17. Hope everyone's doing good. So, yeah, I'm very excited about today's show. It is it's Saturday. Again, it's like 11:17. It's a pretty overcasty day. It's supposed to be not a very nice weekend again with weather, but it's been raining and crappy for a while. We have glimpses of the sun, but it is what it is. But anyway, I went last night to see just an amazing film, and it's been part of this series that I reviewed one movie. There's a third movie coming in the series that I'm hoping I can go to. I'm not sure if I can go, but I'm hoping I can. And so this show, this show is going to be all about this movie that I'm going to talk about, and I'm very excited to take a deep dive into because it was a wild. The whole night was just a wild experience. So the great the Waldo After Dark, which is a awesome small little group of people, super creative people that I've gotten to know over the last few years and gotten to become pretty good friends with them. Buffy and Sammy. They started this series called The Waldo After Dark probably about 2 or 3 years ago. I think closer to 2 years ago. Where basically they specialize in showing a lot of kind of cult B movies and exploitation movies. And I've gone to lots of really awesome showings that they have, and they always usually get really amazing transfers. I've seen like Maniac Cop. I saw quite a few '80s films that I had never seen before. I got to see Akira there. There's been a whole bunch of movies, and it's just been wonderful. They had a really awesome showing of Dario Argento's Suspiria for Halloween. I think it was almost 2 years ago now, which is crazy. Just so many great films, and so it's all at the Waldo Theater, which is an amazing theater in Waldoboro, in downtown Waldoboro, that was restored, and the town put a bunch of money into it over the last few years, and it's been revitalized, and it's a really great concert venue now. And so Buffy and Sammy basically started this Waldo After Dark to kind of showcase these kind of weird and obscure movies and cult movies, and just really amazing. So they started this series about where they wanted to pay tribute to the late great David Lynch, one of my, well, probably as far as film directors go, definitely for me, um, the most influential and the biggest source of inspiration for me when it comes to well, really with my band Quantum. And there's so many other influences that go into the weird little band that I have with Quantum, but that was it. That was what started it for me. And so the connection to David Lynch for me has been since I was a little kid, like since I was like 11 or 12 years old. And so it was very sad and heartbreaking when I heard of his passing earlier this year. And then a year or two ago, his main composer, Angelo Badalamenti, who is also my favorite film composer of all time, passed away. So what the Waldo After Dark folks did is they set up a series to kind of pay tribute to his incredible track record and legacy as a filmmaker. And it started with Eraserhead, which was last month, and I saw that. I did a show on seeing Eraserhead. That was just a mind melting experience. They they typically when Waldorf After Dark gets a hold of a movie, when they have these showings, they usually get really good high end versions of the films, like high end Blu-ray versions, and the sound system at the screen and the sound system that they have at the Waldorf Theater is kind of incredible. So you really get the bang for your buck, and not only with the David Lynch series that they've been doing, but with all of their other films, they really go all out as far as like kind of decorating the theater in the vibe of that movie that they're showing. Like for instance, they had when they had Dario Argento's Suspiria on Halloween, they kind of decorated the whole place in this very giallo style with lighting, and it was super cool. And then they have for each movie that they show, they always have little trinkets and things, stickers. They'll have the soundtracks to those album to the film, like on record or vinyl. They'll have movie memorabilia that's all tied to that particular movie. And for the David Lynch series, they went all out. They've had all kinds of really great little trinkets and little great photos and just all things that are tied to the history of all of the amazing films that David Lynch has done. And when you walk in to the lobby after you buy your ticket, they have all of this super cool stuff on display. And it's so you get more, it's not like you're just going to a movie, you get like an experience and you're kind of pulled into the aesthetic of that particular film. So it's more of an experience. And so last night was the second film. They World After Dark is doing. They were set up for showing three David Lynch films. The first one being Eraserhead, which I saw, which was again completely mind blowing. I did a show on that a few weeks ago, and then last night was just amazing, just an amazing experience. But and I'm going to really go into that. But Wild at Heart, and then the last movie they're going to show in the series is Mulholland Drive. Mulholland Drive is the only David Lynch film I ever got to see in the theater when it came out. So that was, onto itself an amazing experience. And as long, and it's weird to say that because as long as I've been a fan of his work, I never really got a chance to see any of his films until Mulholland Drive. So I'm grateful that I had that experience to see one of his movies, when it came out at the time. So I went with a good buddy of mine, Leo. We went to go see Wild at Heart last night, and this was actually I have my favorite film of David Lynch's work is Blue Velvet. That's to me is the movie for me, and that movie is just such a mysterious experience and just such a I don't know. It's such a I don't know, like a fever dream to me. Dennis Hopper, just incredible. Kyle MacLachlan. I mean, but Wild at Heart again is a movie that has a real deep connection for me. It's probably, I mean, it's definitely one of my favorite David Lynch films, but it has a real deep connection because it was literally the first movie of his that I had ever seen. I was like 11 or 12 when this film came out. I mean, it's hard to believe this came out in 1990. So I was like in middle school when this movie came out. And I remember seeing Wild at Heart. I think it was like on TV. Back in that time, you had, well, really you had HBO and Cinemax and Showtime. They were like news, or they were TV networks at the time that showed movies all the time. And HBO was the big one that premiered a lot of movies and would show movies in rotation. And I remember seeing Wild at Heart when I was like 11 years old, and it just completely, well, kind of changed my life, and I never seen anything like that before because it was so dark, it was so surreal, it was so strange, it was really violent, and it was beautiful. I mean, it just had. I've talked a lot about David Lynch's work in the past, and the thing that I love about his work, and one of the thing that I love so much about what I love so much about Angelo Badalamenti's style of composing is the variety, but there's the juxtaposition of light and dark. I love when there's a lot of emotions, brought to the table. And to me, like, honestly, I feel like David Lynch's work, even though, like, obviously his work is incredibly surreal and strange for a lot of people, and it's a very visceral experience. I feel like, at the end of the day, I really feel like, and everything obviously has a very, all of his films have a very dreamlike quality, of course, but I honestly think as a filmmaker and his films, they are more realistic to me as to like what the human experience really is, at least for me. And it just completely nails that human experience of what living is like. And no other director really has that, strikes that kind of chord for me that way, as far as like, even though his life is, or his films are so surreal and strange, and they're uh, tragic and horrifying, and then beautiful all at the same time. To me, that's what, for me personally, that's what life is. And so for me, it just strikes this chord of where it's, I'm seeing like and feeling reality when I watch his films on the big screen. I know that sounds maybe a little strange for some people, but I've often described myself too to other people like I've always felt this way, but I've always felt like I'm a, the way I live and the way I feel, like how reality is most of the time is I kind of feel like I'm an extra, or either an extra or a character in a David Lynch film. I feel like that's how life is. I've always felt that way. So, but I saw Wild at Heart at such a young age. I had never seen anything like it. It came out in 1990. And it left such a deep and haunting impression on me. And then shortly after Wild at Heart came out, that was when, I think it was maybe a year or two later, was when the the amazing series Twin Peaks came out, and then I got into Twin Peaks, and I was obsessed with that, especially the first two seasons of that. Some of the greatest television ever made. And he also made spin-off movies off of that. Fire Walk with Me. I mean, just amazing, amazing work. The music for that series just still haunts me. Com- Composed, of course, by Angelo Badalamenti. So, yeah, I mean, just a transcending experience. And and speaking of which, David Lynch was a practitioner of transcendental meditation. And I've seen interviews with him where he talks about it, and it's interesting because he talks a lot about, in that philosophy of, kind of in achieving some kind of inner enlightenment and working with this inner, light and beauty. And I always find it's really funny in a lot of ways because, he is working in this very, well, meditative state, as far as like what he practices as his religion, and it's all about this kind of oneness, and this being in touch with the inner light and truth. But yet, when I see his films are so, so incredibly nightmarish and horrific at times, and I just always find it funny because, like, this weird paradox around around his, I guess you call it, spiritual practice that he participated in all his life, and yet but yet he creates these incredible, nightmares that are brought to the big screen, and I don't know, I just find that really funny into itself. And again, seeing Wild at Heart when I was a kid, it was the first movie I ever saw by David Lynch. But not only was it that, which is big enough, but it was the first movie I ever saw with Nicolas Cage, who to this day is pound for pound my favorite actor working today. It was also my first film of seeing the great and magnificent, iconic actor Willem Dafoe and Laura Dern. I mean, just an incredible cast, and all of those actors have just done, you know, incredible bodies of work since then. You know, especially Nick Cage and Willem Dafoe, so prolific. Probably, you know, just, I mean, just the ability of these actors and Laura Dern is endless. You know, and it's, you can see in any of their films that they've done. You know, I feel like these movies, they weren't, you know, these movies really, I think Wild at Heart really more or less put these guys on the map. Like, I think that it really got the public's attention, you know, and so, and I can't believe that this film came out in 1990. Like, it's just wild to me. And the whole experience of seeing Wild at Heart last night was just crazy. There was a whole series of events that happened before the movie showed. The movie almost wasn't shown at all, and it was a chaotic night. And before I talk about those things, something similar had happened to me at the Waldorf After Dark about a year ago. Last year, they Waldorf After Dark. One of the movies they were showing was they were showing the original Wicker Man with Christopher Lee, which is one of my all-time favorite horror films. And they were showing the original there, and it was during the winter. And I have a really great Blu-ray edition of that film, the original Wicker Man. That's one of my all-time favorite horror films. And so I was like super excited to see it on a big screen. And I remember I was out. I had talked to my girlfriend about going, and she had never seen it. She likes movies a lot, but she is not into movies as much as I am. I guess in a lot of ways she is, but she's not so much into some of the stuff I'm into. But she actually is into a lot of horror films. She doesn't like to admit to it, which is kind of funny. But anyway, we had made a date, and she said she would go because I had told her about this movie, about The Wicker Man, and she had never seen it before. And I was super excited to see it. And we made a date night where we were gonna go out for a nice dinner and then go to the movie. And the Waldorf Theater is pretty close. She lives in Rockland. The Waldorf Theater is only like 15 or 20 minutes away from her house. It's about an hour for me. I live in Northport, but from her house is like a 15-minute drive. So, but what ended up happening was the weather was so shitty that day, and it was a snowy day. And then it turned into rain and black ice, and it was just a miserable day. Pouring rain, it was freezing rain, and then it was just a terrible night. But we ended up going to dinner because where we went to dinner, we went to this really beautiful restaurant in Good Company, which is really close. We ended up going to dinner, and then the weather was so shitty, we were on the fence about going to the movies because it was just horrible out and kind of dangerous. But over the course of dinner, we were almost going to cancel the plans, and she wasn't really excited about it. But I managed to kind of convince her, "Oh, we'll be fine. I'll take my time, and it's not that far away. We'll get there, and we'll be safe, and we'll just take our time. We don't have far to drive." And so she ended up agreeing to still go to the movies. Originally, she wanted to go to the movies to go see The Wicker Man, but then we had to cancel. We were going to probably cancel because of the weather, and then just hang back at her house. But I convinced her anyway, and then so we drove down there, and it was miserable. Took my time, got there safely, got into the theater. There was only like a couple of people there, and it was because of the weather. But I was still like super excited to see The Wicker Man and to see her experience it for the first time because I had talked to her a lot about it and really hyped it up. So, but they had basically they had problems with the film projector, and the film was not playing. So they couldn't get it to work. So it was like, okay, we just hanging out and waiting. We were waiting in the seats for a while, and they were having all kinds of issues, and they could not get the film to work, and all these things, and it went on for a while, and then finally, my girlfriend, who is very tech savvy, she offered to help, and so she went into the booth to try to help Sam and Buffy figure out this problem, and they could not fix it. And the guy who does the sound and the actual running of the projector was nowhere to be found, and it was chaotic, and so they couldn't figure it out. And again, it was a really awful night. The weather was terrible, so there was only like a handful of people there, but there was like maybe 10 or 15 people there that were hardcore about seeing the movie no matter what. And they were trying to fix the theater, trying to figure it out. They couldn't figure it out. And I remember at one point I was sitting there for a while, and I went up to go to the bathroom, and because it was a stormy, rainy night and snowy night, I was wearing these giant winter boots, and I got up and I walked down the stairs and I tripped, and I went flying, and I landed on my ass so hard. I tripped on this top stair. The staircase, the way the stairs are set up there is not great, and I'm a super clumsy person. I wasn't paying attention, and I tripped, and I saw myself falling, and I was not in control, and I grabbed the banister, and it kind of helped, but then I still landed really hard on my back and on my tailbone, and I fucked up myself bad. I was in a lot of pain, but I managed to get up. But there were a few people there that saw this happen, and it was super embarrassing. But they basically thought I died, and they came rushing over, and I got up, and I was okay, and but I was in pain, and then I was like trying to recover from that, and I was trying to play it cool and like play it off, but I fucked up my back. But I got up and I was okay. I was moving around, and I knew I was going to be super sore. And so still waited for another 40 minutes, and we were there for almost 2 hours, and the movie never played. They couldn't get it to work. So we ended up going home. We got a refund, and we drove home, and the weather was even worse. I got home, I was just writhing in pain, and yeah, that was not a great experience. And then months later, they showed the film The Wicker Man, but I was not able to go. So it was an adventurous night. And last night was almost the same thing. Thankfully, I did not get injured, but it was a wild experience that went hand in hand with the film, actually. So we got to the theater last night, and right, when you walk in the theater, there's the little front desk, and that's where you usually buy the ticket. And there was like a couple of people there in the lobby, and we're waiting around, and there was nobody there. Usually it's Buffy who does the tickets, and Buffy was not there, so we're standing around and for 5 minutes or whatever, and there was nobody there to do the tickets. So I was like, okay, I'm not sure what's going on here. And then I ran into another friend, my friend Erin, who was there, and she's like, well, actually, the tickets are going to be in the lobby where they're selling them. So I was like, oh, okay. So then we walked down there, and there was a lot of people there. There was the theater for throughout the night. I'd say, well, by the time the movie actually played, it was pretty full. Like there was a lot of people there, so it was really great to see. Sometimes for the World After Dark, there's like a very small group of people, and sometimes it's but usually, well, when it's a small crowd, the people are always really into the film, and so and then sometimes it's actually pretty busy. And last night it was pretty packed. There was a lot of people there. So Leo and I walked down to the lobby, and there was when we got down there was a whole bunch of people kind of there hanging out and waiting to get into the theater. And so went saw Sammy. She was working the cash register. I went up to her, and she looked. I went up to get my ticket, and she looked stressed out. She looked worried, and I was like, "What's wrong?" And she's like, "Well, we're having issues with the film. We can't really get the thing to be. It's not operating, and it's not working. Basically, they can't get the disc. They had a Blu-ray version of the film, I guess, and they couldn't get it to play. And I was like, oh. And she was like, uh, Buffy is out trying to track down a cord, some extra external cord that they could use to have a backup plan, and that they put into a call to the guy who was the main tech guy at the theater, and he was on his way down, and they were saying they weren't. She basically said we are not sure if we're going to be able to really show the movie. We're hopeful, but and I was just like, oh man, really? And technical things happen, and there's like so many things that like can happen out of your that are out of your control, obviously. And I was like, oh man, this is a bummer. So I was like, okay. And then so at that point, I decided, well, I could just get my ticket, but then I was like, oh, I'll wait. I'll wait. I'll hang back. We'll hang here for a while. Maybe get a beer or something and wait to see what happens. So so I decided to wait, basically. And we just kind of hung out in the lobby, and they had the whole theater, decorated and all the cool, like, David Lynch memorabilia from, they had a lot of stuff left over from, put out on display from uh, Eraserhead, and then they had a lot of cool shit for Wild at Heart. And so, we were hanging out in the lobby, and there was a lot of people there. And I was there, hanging out for about 5 minutes, and more people were coming in. Like, it was getting really busy in there, and it was starting to get crowded. And I turned to Leo and said, I think I got to run to the bathroom. So, and they have a long kind of staircase, and the bathroom is upstairs. So I was like, I got to run to the bathroom, and I'll be right back. So then I went up to use the bathroom. I went up to the bathroom, and I realized there's no lights on up there. So I went to the bathroom. There's no lights in the room where right before the bathrooms. And I'm like, that's kind of odd. And then I went to the men's bathroom, and there was no lights, and I'm like, that's weird. And it was like pretty much pitch black, pitch dark at that time. And I'm like, okay. So then I figured, oh, that I'll just find the light switch, and there was no light switch to be found. And I had turned on the light of my phone, couldn't find a light switch anywhere. And I'm like walking all around the bathroom, and I'm like, and I had to go to the bathroom pretty bad. And so I was looking around, couldn't find the light switch. And I'm like, okay, maybe it's out in the front, the entrance way of the bathroom. And I went out there, looked all around that wall with the light shining it, couldn't find the thing at all. And I'm like, what the heck's going on here? And this went on for a few minutes, and I could not find the light switch. And I'm like, maybe I'm just missing it. And then someone else, a couple other people came up to use the bathroom, and then there was some other guy in there, and he saw me with my phone, and he's like, "What's going on?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can't find the light switch." So then he got his phone out in the light, and we're both like in the dark trying to find the light switch in the bathroom. And he's like, "What the hell is going on here?" And he was getting kind of frustrated, and I had to go to the bathroom. And we're like in there for like 5 minutes trying to find the light switch, and there was no light switch. And then we kind of came to the conclusion there must be some kind of switch downstairs that they must turn on all of the lights in the building or something, and that we can't have access to that or something. So I went to the bathroom anyway. I had my light, and I put it up on the wall, and I did my business, and I was just like, okay. So, and then never found the light, and it was super dark, and there were a couple of people that went into the bathroom, but because there was no light, they decided not to go to the bathroom, and they just went back downstairs. So I was like, okay, I guess I got to tell them that there's no lights in there, because, and I was like reluctant to tell them because I know they were getting stressed out because they couldn't get the movie to play. So I was like, okay, whatever. So I went downstairs, and the lobby was packed, and we were hanging out for a few more minutes, and noticed that like a lot of people were buying tickets. So Leo and I decided, well, fuck it, we'll just buy a ticket and hope for the best. And we bought a ticket, and we bought some beers, and then we got our seats, and we were just kind of like, okay, we'll just see how things go, and whatnot. And then we took our seats, and again, the theater was pretty packed. Like, there was a lot of people there, and I didn't the time that the movie was supposed to start was 8 o'clock, and I didn't look at my phone at all, so I didn't know what time the movie or what time it was. And they had said because of this the movie was going to be starting later. And Wild at Heart isn't that long of a movie. It's like an hour and 45 minutes. It's under 2 hours, I believe. So, and I was like, fine, that's we can hang out. So we hung out, and we were there for quite a while, just shooting the shit. And I ran into a couple of friends there that had never seen the movie before, so that was really cool. For me, being a film fan, I love sharing. Like, I love the experience of going to watch a movie with a group of friends or a friend, especially if it's a movie I really really love, and I might have talked about it a lot, and watching it with that person and seeing what their experience is. Like, I love that. I love seeing how that person might react. Like, they might not like it, they might not think it's that great, but a lot of the times it's been that the opposite, where they'll be pretty excited and kind of blown away by it too. And I love doing that. Like, I'll look over and watch their reactions to certain things in the movie, and it's so cool because, and especially with Wild at Heart, because it's a movie I saw when I was so young. And I own a really amazing Blu-ray edition of the film, which is really just an incredible edition. Tons of special features. So, Wild at Heart's a movie I've seen so many times. I can't really count the actual times I've seen it. So anyway, we're waiting and waiting and waiting, and I did not look at my phone, and I knew it was getting later, and we were there for, I'd say, it felt like it was probably 30, 35, 40 minutes or so, until after we got there, and we got there about quarter of 8, and the movie was supposed to start at 8, but I knew we were going way over. So I was like, okay, whatever. And the theater was packed, and people were just kind of hanging out, and then after us waiting there for a long time, Sam came in and said, well, we have a backup plan. Basically, I'm going to hook up my laptop. She made this announcement to everybody. She's like, I'm going to hook up my laptop, and we're going to show Wild at Heart through my laptop. She said, I have a different version of the film, which is a French import, and it has some French subtitles on it, but the film is in English. And we're going to do that. So she saved the day, and everybody was like, yes, cool. Okay, so then I was a little worried about that, because then I thought, well, maybe the quality is not going to be very good. And because I don't know, I'm pretty particular about those kinds of things. And so so they were able to play the movie, and the movie started, and it looked really great. It looked really great. This particular version was great, and it was a beautiful transfer of the film, and it was amazing. And we're getting maybe 40 minutes into the movie, and people are really reacting to the film. That's one thing I have now that's very different for me now, is I've seen so many of his films so many times, and watching it now, like, I hadn't seen Wild at Heart in a few years. And one of the things that jumps out to me more is the humor in David Lynch's films. Like, they're really funny, and people were laughing and people were gasping at times. It's uber violent, this movie. It's one of his most violent movies, I think, but it's also super funny, and it's an amazing film. And I was just blown away by it. Again, it was like that experience, like I've said before, where it's like watching it for the first time. As many times as I've seen this movie, probably or 100 times, it feels fresh and new, and it still holds up, and it even, I don't know, resonates even more. So we got about 40 minutes or so into the movie, and it was weird. We were sitting there watching a movie, and people were totally into the movie and totally digging it. And suddenly there was this weird light, and I thought maybe it was me, like, hallucinating, but then other people said they saw it too. But while we were watching the movie, there was this weird, like, almost like it looked like somebody turned on a big giant strobe light for a second and then turned it off. And it was this big, like, orb of light that suddenly flashed in the room. And then 2 seconds or a minute after that, the whole room lost power. like everything went out. All the lights, the film stopped playing. All the lights went out in the room. It was really weird, and it just like basically everything. I thought there was a power outage, and I think there was. Basically, all the power went out, and so and we're like, oh shit, what the hell? What the hell's going on? Because it was right at the point where just when when everybody was really getting into the film. So we're sitting in the dark. The film stopped playing. All the power went out. Totally surreal. And it was like, okay, what the hell is going on now? And then a minute or two later, the emergency floodlights came on, and suddenly there like this giant floodlight, which was overhead, in case of emergencies came on, and it's like giant, super insanely bright white light, and it was so disorienting. And then a minute later, the film started, and then we were able to watch the movie all the way through. And I had to go to the bathroom so bad at one point because I had some beer and I was like, oh, I had to go to the bathroom so bad. But I hate more than anything to get up and if I'm at a theater and to miss anything. I hate doing that. So I was like, okay, I'm not gonna pee my pants. I'm gonna try not to. I want to watch this movie. I don't want to get up, but this sucks because I'm uncomfortable. Blah blah blah. So anyway, I was able to adjust, and then I was fine. Then it went away. The burning urination feeling, and then I was fine, and I stayed right to the end, and I was totally into it, and it was amazing. And at the end of the whole experience, we talked about the whole night, and we were like, "Yep, this was the perfect way to see a movie of David Lynch. Like all of the weird things that had happened with like the movie not being able to play, there was no lights in the bathroom, the film shutting down, power outages, the floodlights coming on, and them having to use a backup version of the film, which was a French version. It was just great. So the whole experience of all the kind of chaos of the night added so much to the experience, and I'm glad that all of that shit happened. Wild at Heart is such a masterpiece of a film. Some of my friends, some people I know that went there and that had never seen it before, it was their first time seeing it, which blows me away. Really, really loved it. So I'm hoping I can go see Mulholland Drive, but we'll see. I'm going to try my damnedest to go see that. Another masterpiece. I have not seen that film in a really, really long time. But what an experience. So thanks to Sam and Buffy for bringing such, amazing films to the big screen. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time. Peace.